Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I sat at my childhood dining table, fork halfway to my mouth, when my sister Sarah stood up and announced to the entire family that my online business was just me playing pretend entrepreneur. The room erupted in laughter as my parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins all nodded in agreement. Sarah continued her humiliation, calling my work a little online thing that wasn't real business. I forced a smile, quietly responded, understood, and finished my meal in complete silence. What they didn't know was that Monday morning, I would send one email that would change everything forever. The drive home from that family dinner felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. Every red light gave me another moment to replay Sarah's words, the way she emphasized pretend like I was still 8 years old playing with toy cars in the backyard. The laughter that followed her announcement echoed in my head as I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot. I climbed 3 flights of stairs to my modest one-bedroom apartment, the same place I'd been living for the past 3 years while building what everyone called my little online thing. As I unlocked my door, I couldn't help but think back to how this whole situation started. 3 years ago, I was a 25-year-old Stanford computer science graduate, sitting in my college dorm room, staring at lines of code that would eventually become my life's work. Most of my classmates were rushing to join big tech companies in Silicon Valley, but I had a different vision. I wanted to create something that could analyze market trends and make investments with surgical precision. The platform I built wasn't just another trading app. It was a sophisticated digital investment system powered by machine learning algorithms that could predict market movements with 93% accuracy. I called it quantum analytics, and it started small with my own $5,000 in savings from part-time jobs and summer internships. While I was developing this revolutionary technology, Sarah was struggling with her own entrepreneurial dreams. She had this idea about sustainable packaging for e-commerce companies, which was actually brilliant, but she had no technical background and zero business experience. She'd spent months trying to get funding, going to pitch competitions, and networking events, but nobody was taking her seriously. I remember the night she called me, crying about her latest rejection from a venture capital firm. She was ready to give up on everything and take a corporate job at some marketing agency. That's when I made the decision that would define the next 3 years of our relationship. I couldn't bear to see my little sister fail when I knew she had a good idea. So I created something I called Meridian Capital, a shell investment company with layers of legal protection and anonymous ownership structures. Sarah never knew that her mysterious angel investor, who suddenly appeared with $2 million in funding, was actually her pretend entrepreneur brother. The irony was devastating. While Sarah was building her reputation as a successful tech entrepreneur, appearing on podcasts, and speaking at conferences about her overnight success, I was the invisible force making it all possible. Every major client she landed, every supplier connection that worked out perfectly, every competitor that mysteriously struggled with funding issues, it all traced back to my network and my resources. Her company, TechFlow Innovations, became the darling of the sustainable packaging industry. She hired 37 employees, opened offices in Austin and Portland, and was preparing for an initial public offering that would make her worth $50 million on paper. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my small apartment, watching her success interviews on YouTube, knowing that every achievement she celebrated was built on my silent foundation. The worst part wasn't that she didn't know. The worst part was how she talked about entrepreneurs like me. In her interviews, she'd often mention how important it was to have real business experience, and how too many young people thought they could just play around online and call themselves entrepreneurs. She was essentially describing and dismissing me in front of thousands of people, without even realizing it. But tonight, sitting in my apartment after that humiliating family dinner, something had shifted inside me. For 3 years, I'd been content to watch my sister succeed while I remained invisible. I told myself it was because I loved her, because family meant more than recognition. But as I replayed her words from dinner, I realized I'd been lying to myself. Sarah hadn't just dismissed my work tonight. She'd dismissed me as a person. In front of our entire family, she'd painted me as a delusional dreamer who needed to grow up and get a real job. And everyone had laughed along, including our parents, who'd been telling me for years to be more like my successful sister. I opened my laptop and stared at the email draft I'd been writing for the past hour. The recipient was Marcus Thompson, my head legal counsel at Preston and Associates, the law firm that handled all my business operations through various corporate entities. The message was simple, but I knew it would trigger a series of events that would change both our lives forever. The email contained instructions to withdraw all Meridian Capital investments from TechFlow Innovations and its subsidiaries. The total amount was $28.7 million, which represented not just Sarah's initial funding, but 3 years of additional capital injections, bridge loans, and strategic investments that had kept her company growing. As I hovered my cursor over the send button, I thought about the consequences. Sarah's company had payroll due tomorrow, 3 major client deliveries scheduled for next week, and investment commitments based on their current funding status. Pulling out this money wouldn't just hurt Sarah financially. It would destroy the foundation her entire business was built on. But then I remembered the laughter. I remembered how natural it felt for my own family to mock my life's work. I remembered Sarah's confidence as she declared my business wasn't real, not knowing that her business only existed because of mine. I clicked send. The next morning, I woke up in my modest apartment and walked to my home office, which most people would mistake for a typical tech worker's setup. 3 monitors, a high-end computer, some basic office furniture. Nothing that screamed millionaire entrepreneur. But those monitors displayed something that would shock anyone who understood what they were looking at. Quantum analytics had grown far beyond what I'd originally imagined. What started as a personal investment platform had evolved into a sophisticated financial technology company that managed investments for 17 major corporations across the United States. These weren't small businesses either. I'm talking about Fortune 500 companies that paid me millions of dollars for my market analysis and algorithmic trading strategies. The beauty of my operation was its invisibility. All of my corporate clients knew me only through encrypted communications and legal representatives. They never met me face to face, never knew my age, never saw my modest apartment. To them, I was simply the brilliant mind behind quantum analytics, a mysterious figure who'd correctly predicted the crypto boom of 2021, the tech market correction of 2022, and 3 other major market shifts that made my clients billions of dollars. My portfolio was spread across dozens of investment vehicles, shell companies, and strategic partnerships. The total value was $126 million, but that number only represented my liquid assets. The real value of my empire was in the network ED built and the technology ED developed. Opening my secure portfolio dashboard, I reviewed the structure ID spent 3 years building. $28 million was specifically allocated to Sarah's company through various channels, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. I'd created an entire ecosystem around TechFlow Innovations, systematically removing their competition and creating opportunities that Sarah believed were coincidences. When her biggest competitor, EcoPack Solutions, suddenly lost their major clients last year, that wasn't market forces. It analyzed their investor network and discovered they were vulnerable to a coordinated short position that I orchestrated through 5 different investment funds. When Sarah's company landed a $50 million contract with a major retailer, that wasn't her brilliant sales strategy. I'd been consulting with that retailer's investment team for 8 months, positioning them to need exactly what Sarah's company offered. Her entire career trajectory was my masterpiece, a complex symphony of market manipulation and strategic intervention that made her success seem organic and earned. Sarah wasn't just successful because of my money, she was successful because I'd been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, moving pieces across the business landscape to create the perfect conditions for her growth. The morning after sending my withdrawal email, I sat back in my office chair and realized the magnitude of what I'd built. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. Over the past 3 years, I'd become one of the most powerful behind-the-scenes players in the American investment world. Hedge fund managers sought my advice. Startup accelerators used my market predictions. Tech companies paid premium fees for my algorithmic insights. But despite all of this success, I was still living like a graduate student, driving a 7-year-old Honda Civic, and eating ramen noodles for dinner more often than I cared to admit. I'd been so focused on building wealth and supporting my family that I'd forgotten to actually enjoy any of the fruits of my labor. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Thompson. "Dorian, I've executed your instructions regarding Meridian Capital withdrawal. Are you certain about this decision? The financial impact will be significant for all parties involved." I typed back, "Completely certain. No exceptions, no delays." What Marcus didn't fully understand was that this withdrawal wouldn't just affect Sarah's company. Because of how I'd structured the investment network, pulling Meridian Capital would trigger automatic review clauses in 7 other investment agreements. These other investors, seeing a major player suddenly exit without explanation, would likely panic and start asking questions that Sarah couldn't answer. I'd spent 3 years building Sarah up, creating an intricate web of financial support that made her look like a business genius. Now, I was about to demonstrate just how carefully constructed her success really was. When you remove the keystone from an arch, the entire structure collapses, and Sarah was about to learn that her business empire had been built on a foundation that was entirely under my control. The irony was perfect. Sarah had spent years publicly dismissing online entrepreneurs like me, never knowing that her own success was entirely dependent on the kind of digital innovation she claimed wasn't real business. Her sustainable packaging company, which Shed built her reputation on, was actually just a front end for my sophisticated financial technology operation. As I watched the market data scroll across my monitors, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. For 3 years, it'd been the invisible puppet master, working behind the scenes while Sarah took all the credit. Tomorrow, she would start learning what it felt like to build a business without her secret benefactor pulling the strings. I opened my calendar and blocked off the entire week. If my predictions were correct, Sarah's world was about to collapse, and I wanted to have a front row seat to watch everything I'd built for her crumble into nothing. Monday morning arrived with Seattle's typical gray drizzle, matching my mood perfectly as I sat in my home office, staring at the email draft that would change everything. The cursor blinked in the subject line: "Immediate capital withdrawal, Meridian Capital Holdings." I'd been awake since 4:30, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I wanted to time this perfectly. Sarah's company operated on Eastern Time, which meant their business day started 3 hours ahead of mine. By the time I sent this email, her team would already be deep into their Monday morning routine, completely unaware that their financial foundation was about to disappear. The email was addressed to Marcus Thompson at Preston & Associates, the most discreet corporate law firm in the Pacific Northwest. Marcus had been handling my legal affairs since the beginning, creating the complex web of shell companies and investment vehicles that allowed me to operate with complete anonymity. He knew me as Dorian Chen, the mysterious client who paid his bills in advance and never questioned his substantial fees. The message was deliberately simple: effective immediately, withdraw all Meridian Capital investments from TechFlow Innovations and subsidiaries. Total amount: $28.7 million. No transition period. Complete severance of all financial relationships. For 37 minutes, I stared at that draft, my finger hovering over the send button. This wasn't just about money leaving Sarah's company. This was about destroying 3 years of careful construction, watching my little sister's dreams crumble because she'd chosen to humiliate me in front of our entire family. I thought about Sarah's employees, 37 people who'd built their careers around her company's success. I thought about her business partner, Janet Wilson, who'd left a 6-figure corporate job to join Sarah's startup. I thought about the suppliers who depended on TechFlow's contracts, and the clients who were counting on product deliveries next week. Then I remembered the laughter from Sunday dinner. I remembered how effortless it felt for my own parents to dismiss my life's work. I remembered Sarah's confident smirk as she declared that my business wasn't real, not knowing that her business only existed because mine was very, very real. I clicked send. My phone rang within minutes. Marcus' voice carried the careful tension of a lawyer who'd just received instructions that could trigger a legal catastrophe. "Dorian, I've reviewed your withdrawal request. You understand this will essentially destroy TechFlow Innovations? They have payroll due tomorrow, 3 major client deliveries scheduled, and a pending IPO that depends on their current funding status. I understand completely, I replied, surprised by how calm I sounded. This will also trigger review clauses in several other investment agreements. When word spreads that Meridian Capital has pulled out, it could cause a domino effect of investor panic. Good. That's exactly what I want. Marcus paused for a long moment. In 3 years of working together, Head never questioned my decisions, but I could hear the concern in his voice. Dorian, this seems unusually aggressive for you. Are you certain this is the direction you want to take? Marcus, for 3 years, I've been building someone else's dream while living like a college student. I've made other people rich while my own family thinks I'm a failure. Today, that changes. Execute the withdrawal immediately. After hanging up, I opened my portfolio management system and began implementing phase 2 of my plan. The Meridian Capital withdrawal was just the beginning. Because of how I'd structured Sarah's funding network, pulling my investment would automatically trigger contingency clauses in 4 other major funding agreements. Sarah didn't know that her Series B funding round had been coordinated through my network. The lead investor, Cascade Ventures, had only committed their $12 million because Meridian Capital had provided assurances and co-investment guarantees. When those guarantees disappeared, Cascade would have legal grounds to withdraw their funding as well. Her strategic partnership with Eco Logistics, the supply chain company that handled all her product distribution, was secured through a financial guarantee that ED provided through another shell company. Without that guarantee, Eco Logistics would demand immediate cash payment for all outstanding orders, money that Sarah didn't have without her investment funding. The beauty of my financial architecture was that everything appeared independent on the surface. Sarah believed she'd built a diverse funding portfolio with multiple investors, strategic partners, and business relationships. She had no idea that 93% of her financial ecosystem was actually controlled by different tentacles of my investment network. My computer chimed with a notification. The first wire transfer had been executed. $28.7 million had just disappeared from TechFlow Innovations' operating accounts. In approximately 4 hours, when Sarah's CFO ran the daily financial reports, they would discover that their company was essentially bankrupt. I leaned back in my chair and opened Sarah's LinkedIn profile. Her latest post was from Friday, sharing an article about building authentic business relationships in the digital age. She'd written a paragraph about how important it was to surround yourself with people who understood real business fundamentals, taking another subtle dig at online entrepreneurs who thought they could succeed without traditional experience. The post had 47 likes and 12 comments, mostly from other entrepreneurs congratulating her insights. I wondered how many of those same people would be commenting tomorrow when news of her company's collapse started spreading through the tech community. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Jake. Hope had been at Sunday's dinner. Hey man, hope you're not too bummed about what Sarah said. You know how she gets when she's in business mode. Family barbecue next weekend. I stared at that message for a long time. Jake was a good guy, but Head laughed along with everyone else when Sarah dismissed my work. They all treated it like harmless family teasing, not understanding that they were mocking someone who'd quietly become more successful than any of them could imagine. I typed back, "Want be able to make it. Busy with work." It was true. By next weekend, I'd be dealing with the aftermath of Sarah's financial collapse and probably fielding phone calls from family members who finally understood that my little online thing was actually powerful enough to destroy their golden child's career with a single email. The irony was perfect. Sarah had built her entire public persona around being a successful female entrepreneur who'd overcome the challenges of a male-dominated tech industry. She spoke at conferences about female empowerment and authentic leadership, but her entire empire was actually the creation of the brother she publicly dismissed as a dreamer playing with computers. I opened a new email draft, this time to my accountant. It was time to start phase 3 of my plan, finally living like the multi-millionaire I'd become, while my family thought I was a failure. The subject line read, "Personal Wealth Restructuring, Immediate Implementation." By 10:45 Monday morning, Sarah's world had begun to collapse, though she didn't know it yet. I was monitoring her company's financial systems through backdoor access, ED maintained since the beginning, watching the automatic alerts trigger as their operating accounts hit critical thresholds. Sarah's phone probably started buzzing around 11:15, when Janet Wilson, her CFO, discovered the Meridian Capital withdrawal during her regular morning financial review. I could only imagine Janet's confusion as she stared at her computer screen, trying to understand how $28.7 million had simply vanished from their accounts overnight. The first sign of panic came at 11:37, when Janet called an emergency meeting with Sarah and their head of operations, Michael Rodriguez. I knew this because I still had access to their shared calendar system, another artifact from my early involvement in setting up their corporate infrastructure. By 12:15, word had spread to their board of directors. Richard Chen, their lead board member and former Google executive, was demanding immediate explanations for the mysterious funding withdrawal. This was where my strategy became particularly elegant, because Richard had no idea that the Meridian Capital entity had been dealing with for 3 years was actually controlled by Sarah's little brother. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., giving Sarah less than 2 hours to figure out how to explain something she didn't understand herself. I imagined her frantically calling Meridian Capital's contact number, only to reach Marcus Thompson's office, where she'd be told that the principal had decided to withdraw from the investment for undisclosed reasons. At 1:45, I opened the video conferencing software and joined the board meeting as a silent observer. This was possible because id originally set up their corporate communications systems and maintained administrative access through several technical backdoors. Sarah had no idea I was watching as she faced the most difficult conversation of her professional life. The meeting started with Richard Chen's voice carrying the kind of controlled anger that comes from discovering your company is suddenly broke. Sarah, I need you to explain how we lost our primary funding source without any advance notice or explanation. Sarah's face on the video call looked pale and confused. She was clearly scrambling to maintain composure while having no answers to give. Richard, I'm as surprised as you are. Meridian Capital has been our most reliable partner for 3 years. I reached out to them this morning, but their representatives are saying the principal made an executive decision to withdraw. What kind of executive decision involves pulling $28 million with zero notice? This isn't how professional investment relationships work, Sarah. Janet Wilson chimed in with the financial details that made everything worse. The withdrawal doesn't just affect our operating capital. It triggers automatic review clauses in 4 other investment agreements. Cascade Ventures is demanding an emergency assessment of our funding stability. Ecologistics is requiring immediate cash payment for all outstanding orders. That's when board member Lisa Murphy, a venture capital partner with 15 years of experience, asked the question that changed everything. Sarah, what do we actually know about Meridian Capital? I've been reviewing our due diligence files, and there's surprisingly little concrete information about the principals behind that company. Richard started pulling up documentation on his screen, sharing it with the meeting participants. I'm looking at the incorporation papers now. Meridian Capital is registered in Delaware, but the beneficial ownership is listed as another entity called Quantum Holdings, which is registered in Nevada. The room went quiet as Richard continued digging into the corporate structure, following the trail of shell companies and legal entities that id created to maintain my anonymity. What he discovered next was the moment I'd been waiting for. The registered address for Quantum Holdings Corporate Communications is 1427 Maple Street, Unit 9B, Seattle, Washington. Sarah, does that address mean anything to you? I watched Sarah's face change as the realization hit her. Her confident business executive persona cracked, replaced by shock and confusion. She knew exactly what address Richard had just read, because she'd been there dozens of times for family dinners and holiday celebrations. That's my brother's apartment, she whispered, barely audible over the video call. The silence that followed was deafening. 12 board members and executives stared at their screens, processing the implications of what Sarah had just revealed. Her mysterious angel investor, the sophisticated financial entity that had funded her company's growth for 3 years, was somehow connected to the brother she'd publicly dismissed as a pretend entrepreneur. Richard's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and growing anger. Sarah, Are you telling me that your brother, who you've described as having no real business experience, is somehow connected to our primary funding source? I don't understand how that's possible, Sarah stammered. Dorian runs some kind of online platform from his apartment. He doesn't have millions of dollars to invest in companies. That's when Lisa Murphy said the words that made everything click into place for the rest of the board. Unless he does have millions of dollars, and you've been benefiting from his investment, while publicly dismissing his credibility as an entrepreneur. The meeting devolved into chaos as board members realized they'd been unwitting participants in a family drama that had just exploded into a corporate crisis. Their successful startup, the company they'd been preparing to take public, was actually an elaborate construction built by someone they'd never met, who'd just decided to destroy it for personal reasons. Janet Wilson tried to salvage the situation. We need to contact Dorian directly and find out what it would take to restore the funding. This has to be some kind of misunderstanding. But Richard Chen was already connecting the dots to bigger implications. If Dorian controls our funding through shell companies, what else don't we know about our corporate structure? How many of our business relationships are actually controlled by him? As I watched Sarah's professional reputation crumble in real time, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, but a kind of hollow victory. This wasn't really about the money or the business. This was about 3 years of being invisible, while someone else took credit for my work, culminating in a public humiliation that revealed how little my own family understood about who it'd become. Sarah ended the meeting by promising to drive to my apartment immediately and resolve the situation. As the video call ended, I saw her face one last time before she disconnected, and I realized that our relationship had changed forever. Whether she got her funding back or not, she now knew that her little brother's pretend business was real enough to destroy her career with a single decision. I closed my laptop and prepared for her visit, knowing that the conversation we were about to have would define the next chapter of both our lives. Sarah arrived at my apartment 37 minutes after the board meeting ended, which meant she'd driven well above the speed limit and probably ran at least 2 red lights. I heard her footsteps racing up the 3 flights of stairs, then aggressive pounding on my door that echoed through the hallway. When I opened the door, she pushed past me without waiting for an invitation, her professional composure completely shattered. Her usually perfect business attire was disheveled, her hair messy from running her hands through it during the drive over. This wasn't the confident entrepreneur who'd humiliated me at Sunday dinner. This was my little sister, panicked and desperate. "Dorian, what the hell is going on?" she demanded, spinning around to face me in my modest living room. "My CFO just told me that our primary investor withdrew $28 million this morning, and somehow that investor is connected to your address. I need you to explain to me how that's possible." I walked calmly to my kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, taking my time before responding. "Would you like something to drink? You look upset." "I don't want anything to drink. I want answers. My company is going bankrupt because some investor named Meridian Capital decided to pull out without explanation, and that company is somehow registered to your apartment building. My board thinks I've been lying to them about our funding sources." I walked back to my living room, where Sarah was pacing like a caged animal. "Sarah, you should sit down. This conversation is going to take a while." "I'm not sitting down, Dorian. 37 people are going to lose their jobs tomorrow because of this. I have suppliers demanding immediate payment, clients expecting product deliveries, and a board of directors who think I've been fraudulent about our corporate structure. So please, explain to me how my little brother who plays with computers is connected to a $28 million investment withdrawal." I set my glass down and walked to my home office, gesturing for her to follow. "You want to understand what's happening? Come see what I've actually been building for the past 3 years." Sarah followed me into my office, where my 3-monitor setup was displaying real-time market data, investment portfolios, and corporate financial dashboards. I sat down and opened my secure trading platform, revealing the full scope of quantum analytics. "This is my little online thing," I said, pulling up my portfolio summary. $126 million in managed assets across 17 Fortune 500 corporate clients. I've predicted every major market movement for the past 3 years with 93% accuracy. My algorithmic trading strategies have generated $2.4 billion in profits for my clients. Sarah stared at the screens, trying to process numbers that didn't match the narrative she'd constructed about my life. This can't be real. You live in a tiny apartment and drive a Honda Civic. You eat ramen noodles for dinner. I eat ramen noodles because I've been spending my money on other things, I replied, opening another dashboard, like funding my sister's sustainable packaging company through a shell investment entity called Meridian Capital. The blood drained from Sarah's face as I showed her 3 years of financial records, detailing every investment, loan, and strategic support payment I'd made to TechFlow Innovations. Not just the initial $2 million angel investment, but dozens of subsequent funding injections, bridge loans, and emergency capital infusions that had kept her company growing during difficult periods. "You've been Meridian Capital this whole time," she whispered. "I've been more than Meridian Capital," I said, opening additional files that showed the broader scope of my involvement in her success. "Remember when your biggest competitor, EcoPack Solutions, suddenly lost all their major clients last year? I orchestrated a coordinated short position that destroyed their investor confidence. Remember when you landed that $50 million contract with Megacorp Retail? It'd been consulting with their investment team for 8 months, positioning them to need exactly what your company offered." Sarah sank into the chair beside my desk, staring at documentation that revealed how thoroughly I'd engineered her career trajectory. "Everything I built was actually you. Everything you built was actually us," I corrected. "Your ideas were brilliant, Sarah. Your execution was solid. Your leadership skills are real. But your funding, your opportunities, your competitive advantages, and most of your strategic partnerships were me working behind the scenes to make sure you succeeded." She was quiet for several minutes, scrolling through financial records that showed the true foundation of her business empire. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you never would have accepted it," I said. "You needed to believe you'd succeeded on your own merit. You needed to build confidence as a leader and establish credibility in the industry. If you'd known your success was dependent on your little brother's money, it would have destroyed your self-confidence. So you just let me humiliate you instead," she asked, looking up from the computer screen with tears in her eyes. "You let me dismiss your work in public, call you a pretend entrepreneur, make jokes about your online business, while you were actually the person funding everything I claimed as my own achievement." I leaned back in my chair, feeling 3 years of suppressed frustration finally surface. "I let you build something beautiful, Sarah. I wanted to see you succeed. I wanted our family to be proud of you. I thought eventually you'd mature enough to appreciate what we'd built together. But I ruined that at dinner Sunday night. You didn't just ruin it, you revealed what you really think about me, what our whole family thinks about me. You made it clear that my work, my intelligence, and my contributions to this family are worthless in your eyes." Sarah was crying now, understanding for the first time the magnitude of what I'd done for her and what she'd thrown away with her careless words. "Dorian, I didn't know. If I'd known what you were really doing, I never would have said those things. But you should have known," I replied. "You should have asked questions about your mysterious angel investor. You should have wondered how all these incredible opportunities kept falling into your lap. You should have respected your brother enough to find out what he was actually building, instead of assuming he was wasting his time." That's when I showed her the most devastating revelation of all. I opened files showing similar financial support had been providing to other family members. Uncle Tom's construction company expansion, Cousin Jake's restaurant franchise success, Aunt Linda's boutique chain development. None of them knew their success was connected to my investment network. "The family dinner wasn't just about you humiliating me," I explained. "It was about 13 family members unknowingly mocking the person who'd been secretly funding their dreams and business ventures for the past 3 years." Sarah stared at the documentation, showing how I'd quietly supported our entire extended family's entrepreneurial efforts. "You've been helping everyone. I've been helping everyone while living like a broke graduate student, because I believed family was more important than recognition. Sunday night taught me I was wrong about that. Dorian, please. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll apologize publicly. I'll tell everyone what you really do. I'll give you credit for everything. Just please don't destroy my company. Those people don't deserve to lose their jobs because I was an idiot. I looked at my sister, seeing genuine remorse for the first time in years, and realized that this conversation had changed both of us forever. She finally understood the scope of my capabilities and the depth of her mistake. But understanding and forgiveness were two different things. Sarah, I'm not destroying your company to punish your employees. I'm withdrawing my support because continuing to enable your success while you dismiss my worth is destroying me. You need to learn how to build something real on your own merit. And I need to learn how to live like the successful entrepreneur I actually am. The next phase of our conversation would determine whether our relationship could be rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect, or whether the damage was too deep to repair. Word spreads quickly through family networks, especially when people's livelihoods are suddenly at stake. By Wednesday morning, my phone was ringing constantly, with panicked calls from relatives who were discovering that their business successes had been more fragile than they'd realized. Uncle Tom was the first to call, his usually confident construction, foreman voice shaky with confusion. Dorian, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be straight with me. Are you somehow connected to the investment company that's been funding my expansion projects? I'd been expecting this call since Monday. Tom's construction business had grown from a 2-person operation to a 30-employee company over the past 2 years, largely because of strategic investments and project financing it arranged through different shell companies. When I pulled my family funding network, his bank had immediately called his outstanding loans, and several major contracts had been mysteriously canceled. Uncle Tom, yes, I've been supporting your business through Cascade Development Partners. As of Monday, that support has been withdrawn. The silence on the phone lasted almost 30 seconds. When Tom finally spoke, his voice carried a mixture of shock and growing understanding. Jesus Christ, Dorian. How much money are we talking about here? Your business has received approximately $4.2 million in direct and indirect financial support over the past 2 years. Without that support, your current contracts aren't sustainable. $4 million? Dorian, where the hell did you get $4 million? You're 28 years old and you live in an apartment. I built a financial technology company that manages over $126 million in investment assets. What Sarah said at Sunday dinner about my business being pretend? She was wrong. Very wrong. Tom was quiet again, processing the implications. So, when you heard us all laughing at your online business, you decided to show us how real it actually is by pulling our funding. I decided to stop subsidizing family members who don't respect the work that makes their success possible. The conversation with Tom lasted 47 minutes, covering 3 years of hidden support and the reality of how many family businesses were about to collapse without my continued backing. By the end, Tom understood that his nephew wasn't the underachieving dreamer the family thought, but he was also facing the prospect of laying off most of his employees within 2 weeks. Cousin Jake called that afternoon, his restaurant franchise dream crumbling as suppliers demanded immediate cash payments, and his landlord discovered that his lease guarantees were backed by investment entities that no longer existed. Aunt Linda called Thursday morning, crying about her boutique chain losing its credit lines and facing immediate closure. But the call that changed everything came from an unexpected source. My cousin Michelle, who worked as a business journalist for TechCrunch, she'd been quietly investigating the mysterious collapse of several family businesses when she discovered the connection to quantum analytics. Dorian, I need to ask you some questions for a story I'm working on. I've been researching the financial collapse affecting several of our family members' businesses, and I keep finding connections to investment entities that trace back to you. Are you the person behind quantum analytics? I realized that Michelle's journalistic investigation was about to expose everything it'd been trying to keep private. Michelle, this is a family matter. I'd appreciate it if you kept your professional work separate from family business. Dorian, this isn't just family business anymore. Sarah posted something on LinkedIn yesterday that's starting to go viral, and it's painting you as the villain in a family betrayal story. I think people deserve to know the real context. I pulled up LinkedIn and found Sarah's post, which had been shared over 300 times since yesterday. Sometimes the people closest to you will use their power to destroy what you've built. Not because you deserve it, but because their ego can't handle your success. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any business failure. The post had sparked dozens of comments from other entrepreneurs sharing their own stories of family conflict and business sabotage. Sarah had positioned herself as the victim of my petty revenge, without mentioning that her entire business empire had been built on my hidden financial support. Michelle, if you're going to write this story, you need to include the full context. Sarah didn't just hurt my ego, she publicly dismissed 3 years of my work while unknowingly benefiting from millions of dollars of my investment. That's exactly what I want to explore. Dorian, can you prove that you've been funding these family businesses? Because if you can, this becomes a very different story about entrepreneurship, family dynamics, and recognition. Over the next 2 hours, I provided Michelle with documentation showing the scope of my investment network and the extent of my family's financial dependence on my success. She was particularly interested in the technological sophistication of quantum analytics and my track record of market predictions. Michelle's article was published on TechCrunch Friday morning with the headline, "The Hidden Genius: How a 28-year-old Built a Secret Investment Empire While His Family Mocked His Pretend Business." The story went viral within hours, spreading across Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn faster than I could track. The article detailed my academic credentials, the development of quantum analytics, my track record with Fortune 500 clients, and the complex financial architecture I'd built to support my family's businesses. But most importantly, it included the context of Sunday's family dinner and Sarah's public humiliation of my work. By Friday afternoon, my story was being discussed on financial podcasts, shared in entrepreneur Facebook groups, and analyzed by business school professors as a case study in family dynamics and startup funding. The narrative had completely flipped from Sarah's portrayal of family betrayal to a more complex story about recognition, respect, and the invisible work that often supports visible success. Sarah called me Friday evening, her voice exhausted and defeated. "Dorian, I've been getting messages all day from reporters, podcast hosts, and business contacts. Everyone wants to know about our family situation. My own board members are forwarding me articles about how I've been taking credit for your work. How does it feel to have your professional reputation publicly questioned?" I asked. "It feels terrible. It feels like everything I thought I'd built on my own merit is being revealed as an illusion. But Dorian, I deserve this. I was wrong about you, wrong about your work, and wrong about what our relationship meant." The conversation that followed was the most honest communication Sarah and I had shared in years. She acknowledged that her success had made her arrogant, that she'd started believing her own press coverage about being a self-made entrepreneur. She admitted that she'd been embarrassed by my modest lifestyle and had wanted to distance herself from family members who didn't match her professional image. But more importantly, she recognized that my decision to withdraw support wasn't just about revenge. It was about forcing her to confront the reality of what she'd built and whether she could maintain it based on her own capabilities, rather than my hidden assistance. The public revelation had served its purpose. My family now understood that my work was not only real, but had been the invisible foundation supporting their own successes. The question was whether this understanding had come too late to repair the relationships that had been damaged by years of dismissal and recent weeks of financial collapse. 3 weeks after Michelle's article was published, my life had changed in ways I never could have anticipated. My phone rang constantly with interview requests from Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and 3 different documentary production companies who wanted to tell the story of quantum analytics. Major technology companies were offering acquisition deals that would make me worth more than $200 million overnight. But the most important change wasn't professional, it was personal. It moved my operations out of my modest apartment into a proper corporate headquarters in downtown Seattle, a 15,000 square foot office space with 17 employees and all the infrastructure of a real technology company. For the first time in my life, I was living like the successful entrepreneur I'd actually become. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, conference rooms equipped with the latest video technology, and a development lab where my team was building the next generation of predictive analytics software. Walking through those offices every morning, seeing my company name etched in glass at the reception desk, felt like stepping into the life I'd been too afraid to claim for myself. My family's reaction to my transformation had been mixed but educational. Uncle Tom had managed to save his construction business by restructuring his operations and taking on smaller, more manageable projects. The experience had taught him that sustainable growth required building genuine capabilities rather than depending on external funding. When he called to apologize for Sunday's dinner, his respect for my work was genuine and hard-earned. Cousin Jake had been forced to close 2 of his 3 restaurant locations, but had used the crisis as an opportunity to focus on what he did best. His remaining restaurant was now profitable, based on his own management skills rather than my hidden subsidies. Aunt Linda had gone through a similar downsizing process, keeping 1 boutique location and building a business model that reflected her actual market position. But the most significant change was in my relationship with Sarah. On a Thursday afternoon in late November, I was reviewing acquisition proposals in my new corner office when my assistant announced that Sarah was in the lobby, asking if she could speak with me. She looked different when she walked into my office. The confident business executive persona had been replaced by something more authentic and humble. She'd lost weight during the stress of the past month, but there was also a clarity in her eyes that I hadn't seen since we were children. "Dorian, I wanted to update you on what's happening with TechFlow," she said, taking a seat across from my desk. "We've been acquired by Eco Solutions, one of our former competitors. It's not the IPO I'd been planning, but it saved the jobs of 31 of my employees." "I'm glad your team landed safely," I replied. "What about you?" "I'm starting over. The acquisition deal included a non-compete clause, so I can't work in sustainable packaging for 2 years. But honestly, that might be the best thing that could happen to me. I need to figure out what I can actually build on my own, without hidden support from my family network." Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a business proposal, sliding it across my desk. "I've been working on something new. It's a consulting firm that helps family businesses navigate complex investment relationships and ownership structures. Based on everything I've learned from our situation, I think there's a real market for this kind of expertise." I reviewed her proposal, which was thorough, realistic, and based on genuine insights rather than optimistic projections. "This is good work, Sarah. But why are you showing this to me?" "Because I want to do this completely independently. No family funding, no hidden investors, no financial safety net. I want to prove to myself and to you that I can build something real, based on my own capabilities." That conversation marked the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. Sarah spent the next 6 months building her consulting firm from scratch, working out of a shared office space, and taking on small clients who couldn't afford expensive corporate advisory services. It was difficult, humbling work that taught her the difference between inherited success and earned achievement. By the following spring, her firm was profitable and growing based on legitimate market demand. Her clients were family businesses facing the same kinds of complex ownership and investment challenges that had destroyed our own family relationships. Sarah had turned our painful experience into expertise that helped other families avoid similar mistakes. The broader lesson from our story became clear as I watched my family members rebuild their businesses and relationships on more honest foundations. Success that depends on hidden support is ultimately fragile and unfulfilling. Real achievement requires transparency, mutual respect, and the courage to build something based on your actual capabilities rather than external advantages. My own success with quantum analytics had grown beyond anything I'd originally imagined. WED expanded into artificial intelligence research, cryptocurrency analysis, and sustainable technology investments. It'd become a recognized leader in financial technology, speaking at conferences and advising other entrepreneurs about building scalable analytics platforms. But the most satisfying aspect of my success was that it was finally visible and acknowledged. My family understood what I'd built and respected the intelligence and hard work that had made it possible. My employees knew they were working for a legitimate technology leader rather than a mysterious figure operating from an apartment. My clients valued my insights because they understood the track record and expertise behind my recommendations. The story that began with Sunday dinner, humiliation had evolved into something much more complex and ultimately more positive. Sarah had learned that authentic success requires genuine capability and honest relationships. My extended family had discovered that sustainable businesses must be built on solid foundations rather than hidden subsidies, and I had learned that hiding your achievements to avoid threatening other people ultimately serves no one. As I finished preparing for our company's first annual shareholder meeting, I reflected on how different my life had become in just 1 year. The pretend entrepreneur had become a real business leader, surrounded by employees who contributed to something meaningful and profitable. The family relationships that had been built on misconceptions and hidden support had been replaced by connections based on mutual respect and honest communication. The most important lesson I'd learned was that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is allowing them to experience the natural consequences of their choices. Sarah needed to lose her company to understand what she was capable of building on her own. My family needed to face business challenges without my hidden support to develop genuine resilience and capability. Walking into that shareholder meeting, seeing investors and partners who understood and respected my work, I realized that the journey from invisible supporter to recognized leader had been worth every difficult moment. The laughter from Sunday dinner had led to a year of growth, transformation, and ultimately, authentic success for everyone involved. Before I begin, I'd like to ask you something. Have you ever found yourself supporting someone's dreams while they dismissed your own? How did you handle the balance between family loyalty and self-respect? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, I'd appreciate it if you could like this video. Subscribe for more stories about entrepreneurship and family dynamics, and share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of recognition and authentic relationships in business and family life. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it encourages you to pursue your own dreams while building relationships based on honesty and mutual respect.